Fred's a rich white guy with a tiny dong. He did it.
Why would you say that?
Fix it.
Why would you say that?
You know, I was excited for this series back when it was first announced because, you know, this wouldn't be the first time that a character who was mainly made for kids in some sort of realm, whether it be cartoon or comic book or whatever, would be transformed into a more adult-leaning show. Harley Quinn animated series took off and is in season 4, but that's because it's really good. And with Velma, there's problems. Look, it's one of those shows where I feel like it's getting more hate than it should be because that audience score, my goodness gracious.
Oh, heavens!
And the reason I think the audience score is that low is probably a little unfair to the fact that they saw what this show was going to be and how there's no Scooby-Doo in this Scooby-Doo show, and they instantly just wrote it off. But I think the one big thing about this show is that one of the most hateable actresses in Hollywood voices Velma, that being Mindy Kaling. That is definitely the stark difference between the Harley Quinn animated series and Velma, is that the voice actress for Harley Quinn is not other than Kaley Cuoco of Big Bang Theory fame. People seem to like her and have no problem with her. Plus, the thing that the Velma show does that the Harley Quinn show doesn't is that it completely takes everything great about the characters that it's trying to represent from the past and just erase it all. At least with, like I said, the Harley Quinn animated series, the traits to the main characters were still there. It still felt like those characters, they were just evolving. Heck, if we want to talk about reboots or whatever, when they did the Wednesday Addams series, yeah, did they add more to Wednesday in terms of, like, you know, personality and stuff? Sure, but it was still the same Wednesday Addams that we grew up with in the movies in the past. But with Velma, none of the Scooby-Doo characters even act themselves. I think what was great about Scooby-Doo, that series back in the day, is that you had 4 people who were just completely different from each other. I mean, yeah, Fred and Daphne were the rich, popular kids, but they never let that, you know, get in the way of their friendship with Shaggy and Velma, who were more of the nerdy-type characters, Shaggy in a different way than Velma, but they always worked together, they always worked as a team, and even in the 2 movies that were made in the early 2000s, yeah, they split up, but they never had a relationship that was as bad as in this Velma series. This Velma series is supposedly after, like, Velma and Daphne had this friendship and Daphne became hot and just kind of started to, you know, get away from Velma, and that kind of made Velma very jealous. Shaggy is... He's not necessarily a stoner. He's, like, presumed to be, even though he goes, I hate drugs and all this stuff. You can kind of tell he's trying to hide it from people. And, yeah, I said Shaggy, but I meant to say Norville because, well, his name is Norville Shaggy Rogers, but most people just call him Shaggy. Nobody really calls him Norville, so it does kind of get annoying in that sense. Like, no, he is Shaggy. I don't care what anybody else says.
Wasn't me.
My main problem with Shaggy, though, is that he kind of, like, simps for Velma. He's got a, like, crush on her. Even though Velma only sees those 2 as friends, he wants to be more than that. And the thing with Shaggy was, he was never one for love, at least for the most part. I mean, I know in the newest cartoons, they've actually tried to have him and Velma, you know, get together, but it always got in the way of his friendship with Scooby-Doo. And of course, in the movie, the first one, he had the love interest Mary Jane, but that was more kind of used as a joke, because they were trying to imply that Shaggy was a stoner there. I think the big main complaint with Shaggy, or in this case Norville, is the sudden race change to the character. Now, stuff like that doesn't usually bother me. I mean, we're talking about cartoon characters here. I think really you can draw and change cartoon characters however you want. That's just how I see it in this case. I mean, if the Christians can change Jesus from a brown man to a white man, then Shaggy going from a white man to a black man shouldn't be any sort of problem.
I rode into town on an ass. Yo mama's ass.
Alright, that went a little off the rails there. I apologize for that. My bad.
Yo mama's ass.
And even Velma. Velma's practically a brown woman, and in this one, Daphne is of Asian descent. And again, none of that bothers me. It bothers other people, though. But if that's your main complaint, then you're not necessarily watching the show thoroughly. You're just basing it off of how it looks. Oh yeah, and they made Fred into this man baby. Supposedly he hasn't hit puberty yet, so instead of acting like an 18-year-old, he's more like an 8-year-old trapped in an 18-year-old's body. And, not to mention, they make him fucking stupid when that was never the case with any of the people in the Mystery Inc. They always seemed to have their flaws, yes, but there was always something about them that they could contribute to the group. And so far, we're just kind of seeing how much of a dipshit he is. And basically what we get in this show is it's a murder mystery. There's, these hot girls that are, dying and getting their heads cut open and their brains taken for some sort of experiment. And at first people think it's Velma, and then she's like, no, it's Fred. And she thinks that it was Fred, and he ends up getting thrown in jail. It turns out it's not Fred. So now we're back to square one with things, all while Velma's trying to find her missing mother, and all that gets kind of clustered together to the point where all four of them end up, having something to do with the murders. Not in the case that they did it, but they have, these ancestors and this whatever that end up, all correlating back to where these murders took place. And, I don't know, it all just becomes a cluster. There's way too much going on. Another thing in this show that gets on my nerves is it tries to stress girl power, but it, shoves it down your throat. It's not, again, that I have a problem with these characters, having some sort of, strong female character. That's, fine with me. There's been shows and movies that do it really, really well, but in this show, it's always Velma being like, I'm gonna overtake the rich white man with the big dong or small dong or whatever it is.
Rich white guy with a tiny dong.
And she keeps talking about, white privilege over and over and over again, and it's just like, Mindy, I get it. You're upset about this, even though it's kind of hypocritical of her, because recently it came out that she would pretty much fondle and inappropriately touch and kiss some of the men on the set and would threaten to have them fired if they said anything. And yet we're just kind of swiping that under the rug for whatever reason.
Do you smell it? That smell. The kind of smelly smell. The smelly smell that smells smelly.
So the show had good intentions. It just didn't bring everything out right, and I think just completely changing the characters and ignoring everything they were about originally is what brought this way down. But you know what the sad part of this is? This is going to get renewed for a season 2, mark my words, because so many people wanted to go and watch this for the sheer fact that they wanted to make sure that they hated it, or to see that it was as bad as people were making it out to be. And because of that, the views are not necessarily great, but they're up there enough to where if they wanted to renew it for a second season, they most likely will. And after that, I'm not sure. If it doesn't get renewed, then okay, fine. This is a show that I'm probably okay with just being one and done at this point, because I've gotten to see it, and although there's been a few moments that have made me laugh...
Oh, give me one of those tattoos that's actually secret clues about how to escape prison.
I learned how to do this while at Ole Miss. I can do butterflies and Confederate flags.
There's just been a lot where I'm just like, this is cringe.
Exactly. I spit truth without a filter, like every comedian before #MeToo.
Another thing I forgot to mention was this show tries to take a page out of the Harley Quinn animated series playbook, as it takes the whole Velma and Daphne relationship to another level, although I feel like Harley Quinn, the animated series, did it better with comedic moments like this.
Oh, shit. Piss cakes of a dick. All right, listen to me. We shouldn't have done this. We should not have done this.
The mind-blowing orgasmic sex or the staying over?
All of it.
Just the perfect amount of awkwardness before we get to the actual, relationship in itself, whereas Velma just kind of, I don't know, there was more undertones, and it was just kind of annoying to a point, whereas Harley Quinn, it never really shoved it down your throat until it actually happened. This Velma show just kind of beats a dead horse, and it becomes unfunny by, the third or fourth time that they're glaring at each other. Something awkward goes on that kind of triggers them going, man, I really like this woman. And even Scooby-Doo not being in it has nothing to do with my hatred for it either. This is titled Velma, not Scooby-Doo. I can see if it was titled Scooby-Doo and it didn't have the dog in it, there'd be a little bit of a problem, but this is more about the teenagers in school than it is the dog itself. There's really only one Scooby-Doo reference where it was this group that I think Daphne's moms, oh yeah, Daphne has 2 moms, now that's basically from her original parents abandoning her and whatnot. They were like criminals and they abandoned her at the crime scene, and her 2 moms are detectives and whatnot, so they see her at the crime scene as a baby, they take her in and raise her as her own, so Daphne's got 2 moms who are cops. Shaggy's mom is the principal, and also it's very weird, Shaggy's dad looks more like Shaggy than Shaggy himself.
Wasn't me.
But yeah, all in all, I think with the show, it was trying to do what I think a lot of these shows dealing with female empowerment try to do, but they just don't have the right person and even personnel behind it to make it good. You know, Mindy Kaling has always been kind of, like I said, not necessarily hypocritical, but she goes about this whole female empowerment, feminism thing in the wrong way, and she doesn't realize that it's irritating and annoying. There's correct ways to go about it, and there's wrong ways to go about it. It's almost like if you're trying to watch an Amy Schumer stand-up special. Like, all you're gonna get is how, you know, men are bad, and you know, sex stuff and all this kind, and it's just like, look, I get it, you know, but can you, like, do this in a different way? The delivery's a little off, or maybe you can go in some sort of different direction. That might help you, but with Velma, everything just kind of falls flat, and that's why I've kind of just glossed over the plot, because even though the plot, you definitely do get into that, like, oh, who's doing this, who's committing these murders. It's just a show where, you know, with shows like this, by like episode 3, I was like, I don't know if I really like this show, but I wanted to finish it just to, you know, make sure, and because I just wanted to see the conclusion to it, and that was basically all I was watching it for up until that point. So yeah, the Velma show, highly disappointing to me, had high expectations for it, and it really let me down. And again, this is possibly going to get renewed for a 2nd season because of the viewership being mostly people that hated the show anyway, kind of being enough to be able to call for a renewal of the franchise in itself. But it may just about kill the franchise that we've known and loved since we were kids, since our parents were kids, heck, maybe even since some of our grandparents were kids, depending on what generation you grew up in. It's just been a franchise that's hung around for so long because they've been able to just appeal to so many different generations of kids and family, and now they're just making the characters as unrelatable as anything, and people are just losing their interest, and they're kind of fed up at this point. So I wouldn't be surprised if this show was the official death of Scooby-Doo, just like the Fantastic Beasts movies could end up most likely being the potential death of the Harry Potter movie franchise. But hey, that's just my thoughts on this. You can tell me in the comments below, what do you think? But until then, stay safe out there, and don't watch Velma, because you'll probably just end up wasting your time.
Who are you?
If I tell you, will you remember?
I have an illness!